My whole life, I was the quiet, slightly messy little sister, forever standing in the shadow of my older sister, Emma. She was the one who married into money, the one with the perfect suburban house, the one mom always referenced when she said things like, "At least one of my daughters married well." I, Jessica, was the struggling freelancer, the one who worked from a small apartment, the one who apparently hadn't settled down correctly in her mid-30s. This narrative, this deeply ingrained perception of me as the family's black sheep, was something I'd learned to live with, even when it stung. It created a quiet, almost constant ache of inadequacy, one that the occasional mysterious, highly encrypted business call or the subtle gleam of a very limited edition Celine bag I wore couldn't quite counteract in their eyes. The family simply chose not to see anything that contradicted their established view of me. One particularly memorable Thanksgiving dinner, when I was explaining a complex coding project I was working on, a new form of decentralized finance technology, which I thought was fascinating, my mother Margaret patted my arm with that familiar dismissive pity. "That's lovely, dear," she said, cutting me off mid-sentence. "But really, when are you going to stop playing around with these computer things and get a real career? Like Emma. She's a director of marketing now, you know. She actually has an office." Emma, sitting across the table in a shimmering emerald dress, merely smiled smugly, swirling the expensive Cabernet in her glass. I just nodded, a tight smile on my face, and changed the subject to the football game, the sting of the dismissal burning hot in my chest. I wanted to scream, to tell them my computer things were paying the mortgage on the very small, very private condo I was currently furnishing in downtown Manhattan, a place they didn't even know about. But I held my tongue. The time wasn't right. The silence, I learned, was power. The family insults weren't always so passive. My sister-in-law, Charlotte, Emma's husband's sister, a woman whose entire personality seemed built around judging others through the lens of their net worth, was especially skilled at the direct hit. My current job, which involved advising major tech startups on restructuring and scaling, often meant long hours, but it also afforded me a level of financial independence they couldn't fathom. At Emma's bridal shower 2 years ago, Charlotte looked down her nose at my relatively simple yet beautifully tailored navy silk dress. "Oh, Jessica," she'd sighed dramatically, loud enough for half the room to hear. "Still single? It must be so hard to meet anyone when you're working 80 hours a week on those little side hustles. At least your sister finally settled down and married well. I mean, someone has to keep the family name respectable." The condescension dripped off every word, like cheap syrup. I remember taking a slow, calming breath, simply replying, "I'm happy for Emma," and walking away, my composure an impenetrable shield. But the slight felt like a physical blow. The irony was, the little side hustles had just resulted in an $890,000 seed funding round for a client, earning my firm a hefty success fee. But what they didn't know was the sheer scale of the success I was cultivating. Like a secret garden, they were too busy weeding their own perfect lawns to notice. The months that followed only cemented their limited view of me. The little hints I dropped were either ignored or reinterpreted through the lens of my supposed failure. I'd recently purchased a stunning, small but very expensive Patek Philippe watch, a quiet indulgence to mark my firm's first $20 million revenue year. I wore it discreetly to a Mother's Day brunch. Margaret looked at it, squinted, and then said to Emma, "Oh dear, is that watch secondhand, Jessica? You really must be careful with money. Those little gold-plated things break so easily. I'm sure Emma could get you a discount at her jewelry store." Emma, of course, was wearing an enormous diamond bracelet that practically announced her financial status. I simply smiled, lifting my hand to stir my tea, letting the light catch the real gold and the flawless craftsmanship, and replied, "No, Mom, it's not secondhand. It's perfect." The effort it took to keep my voice light, to suppress the urge to correct her, to scream that my watch was worth more than Emma's car, was exhausting. I was living a double life. The messy black sheep they tolerated, and the ruthless, successful founder they would never recognize. Little did my family realize that the little side hustles were about to explode into a multi-million-dollar empire built on the back of my supposed inability to settle down. Software platform we incubated, your shares are now liquid. You just closed on a $23 million deal personally. That means your net worth post-tax is now comfortably north of $40 million. And remember that special maternity leave structure we set up 2 years ago? It's fully funded and untouchable. You're set for life, and then some. I remember sinking onto my couch, the reality of the number hitting me with the physical force. $40 million. It wasn't about the money itself. It was about the security, the freedom, the sheer unassailable proof that my quiet, messy life had produced something spectacular. But the internal struggle was immense. Every bone in my body screamed to march back to Emma's house, to shove the bank statement in their faces, to force them to see me. Yet a deeper, calmer voice urged caution. What did their validation truly matter? The old me craved it. The new me, the $40 million woman, knew that self-worth was the only currency that counted. But I also knew the family dynamic needed to be reset. Permanently. The universe, it seemed, was about to provide the perfect, undeniable stage for the ultimate reveal. The setup for the reveal was almost painfully predictable. My sister, Emma, was pregnant with her third child. The announcement was naturally the event of the season, and the culminating event was the over-the-top pink and gold baby shower. I was 5 months pregnant myself, a fact I had intentionally kept quiet. My husband, Mark, and I had quietly married the year before in a tiny ceremony overseas. No fuss, no family drama. My pregnancy was my own private joy, an oasis of calm that I hadn't wanted polluted by my family's incessant judgment. I attended Emma's shower in a stunning, custom-made maternity dress. A simple, elegant silk in a rich emerald green, but I wore no makeup and kept my hair in a messy, everyday bun. I wanted my presence to be a silent protest against the gaudy spectacle. The venue was an exclusive country club ballroom. Everything was meticulously curated, expensive, and a little soul-crushing. The guests were all the usual suspects, well-dressed, judgmental, and utterly focused on Emma. It didn't take long for the familiar dynamic to assert itself. Charlotte, looking regal in a pale blue suit, cornered me while I was quietly admiring the elaborate dessert table. She zeroed in immediately on my slightly rounded stomach, a look of confused pity crossing her face. "Oh, Jessica," she said, her voice dropping to a loud, theatrical whisper. "I didn't realize you were expecting. How lovely. But really, are you sure this is a good idea right now? You know, with your career being so unpredictable." I took a sip of my sparkling cider, remaining outwardly serene. "We're thrilled, Charlotte." She leaned in, her eyes flicking dismissively over my dress. "But children are so expensive, dear. Private schools, nannies. I mean, Emma and David spend at least $60,000 a year per child, and that's before the trust funds. You'll need real financial security for that, not just a freelance income, a real solid base. I'm just worried. Can you really afford children right now, Jessica?" She ended the sentence with a soft, patronizing laugh, a sound that cut right to the core of the accumulated years of judgment. It was the ultimate, calculated insult. It questioned not just my financial status, but my competence as a future mother. I felt a switch flip inside me. The years of forced silence, the aching need to be seen, the quiet fury over every dismissal, it all focused into a pinpoint of calm, calculating resolve. She had pushed too far. "That's a very kind concern, Charlotte," I said, my voice low and steady, drawing the attention of Emma, who was nearby. "But you really don't need to worry about the affordability of my family." I reached into the small, structured bag I was carrying, a discreet but unmistakable Hermes Constance, and pulled out a small stack of papers that I had printed that morning. I laid them calmly on the linen-covered table directly next to a towering three-tier cake. You see, my husband and I are very organized. In fact, 2 years ago, when we knew we wanted children, we set up a dedicated investment fund specifically for my maternity leave and the initial expenses of our future family. It's fully funded and completely liquid. I tapped the top sheet, a customized financial statement from one of the world's most prestigious private banks. The logo alone made Emma gasp softly. "What is that, a savings account statement?" Charlotte scoffed, trying to regain control. "Not exactly," I replied, maintaining a gentle, almost conversational tone. "It's the consolidated statement for our family stability fund." I paused, letting my eyes sweep over the small gathering crowd that had started to form. The total balance, as of this morning, dedicated just to my unpredictable maternity leave, is $4.3 million. The silence in the opulent room was sudden and absolute. You could hear the distant clink of silverware. Charlotte's face, usually so perfectly composed, went utterly slack. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Emma, who had been listening from a few feet away, practically stumbled. Her eyes, usually so bright with competitive pride, darted between the number on the paper and my completely calm face. I wasn't finished. I gently placed the next document on top of the first, a property deed. "And as for stability," I said, a small, knowing smile touching my lips, "my husband and I found that Emma's neighborhood wasn't quite private enough. So we closed on a lovely 12,000 square foot compound in the Hamptons 2 weeks ago. Cash. The deed is right here. Appraised value, $12.8 million. The final piece of paper I placed down was a sleek, glossy magazine page, the Forbes cover I had approved just a few weeks ago. I didn't say a word. I just slid it across the table for them to read the headline I had glimpsed on my phone at the barbecue. The headline was simply, "Jessica Stone, from quiet coding to the $40 million tech acquisition architect." The staged reaction was a spectacle of human frailty. Disbelief was the first wave. Charlotte reached out and snatched the Forbes page, her fingers trembling as she read the byline. "This can't be you," she whispered, the color draining from her face. "Jessica the freelancer? The one with the cheap watch?" I calmly extended my wrist, turning my hand slightly to let the light hit the Patek Philippe, which I had worn specifically for this occasion. "Oh, the watch. I bought it to commemorate the founding of the tech firm that was recently acquired for $23 million, I said softly. "It's actually a very expensive piece of work, Charlotte. Definitely not gold-plated." Emma's reaction transitioned quickly to shock and then panic. She looked at me, her eyes wide, then at the massive cake, then at the documents, and back to me. The facade of the golden child was visibly crumbling. "Je- Jessica, why didn't you tell us?" she choked out, her voice shaky. Why did you let us why did you let us think you were struggling? You didn't think I was struggling, Emma. I corrected her gently but firmly. You needed me to be struggling. Your position as the successful one, the one who married well, was only secure if I was the failed one. You built your pedestal on my perceived failure, and honestly, it was peaceful not having my financial decisions judged by people whose entire view of success is based on how well they can keep up appearances. Margaret, my mother, rushed over, her face a mask of confusion and instant, nauseating pride. My brilliant girl, a Forbes cover, a mansion. Oh, my Jessica, we had no idea. Why didn't you tell your mother you were a millionaire? This is incredible. The panic was setting in for them now. Their entire family structure, their hierarchy of worth, had been shattered by a few pieces of paper and a calm explanation. The aftermath of the baby shower was exactly what I had anticipated: chaos and damage control. Margaret and Emma were the first to descend, a tag team of fake apologies and transparent attempts to insert themselves into my new reality. The day after the shower, my phone was ringing off the hook. Margaret was tearful. Jessica, darling, I feel terrible about that Mother's Day comment. I truly thought you were struggling. You just never showed anything. Why didn't you just show off a little? We're so proud of you now. You and Mark absolutely must come to Christmas. We can invite the Forbes reporter. I want to tell everyone about my millionaire daughter. I took the call while relaxing on a sun lounger on the terrace of my New Hamptons compound. Thank you for the apology, Mom, I said, my voice calm and distant. But I didn't show off because I didn't need your approval. Your pride now is just as conditional as your pity was before. And no, we won't be at your Christmas this year. Mark and I have decided to spend a quiet Christmas together, focusing on our growing family. Besides, I'll be starting my maternity leave soon, a generous, fully paid one, as you know. Emma's attempts were even more manipulative. She called crying about how much she needed my advice on her husband's struggling portfolio, claiming she was so happy for me, but that she'd always felt so much pressure to be the perfect one. It's true, Emma, I said, cutting her off firmly. You did put a lot of pressure on yourself, and that's not my problem to fix. The only advice I have for you is this: stop defining your worth by your husband's income or your children's school tuition. I worked for my success in private. You flaunted a success that wasn't entirely yours. Now you have to live with the consequences of that public-facing life. I am happy to close that chapter and move on. Margaret, my mother, rushed over, her face a mask of confusion and instant, nauseating pride. My brilliant girl, a Forbes cover, a mansion. Oh, my Jessica, we had no idea. Why did you tell your mother you were a millionaire? This is incredible. The panic was setting in for them now. Their entire family structure, their hierarchy of worth, had been shattered by a few pieces of paper and a calm explanation. The aftermath of the baby shower was exactly what I had anticipated: chaos and damage control. Margaret and Emma were the first to descend, a tag team of fake apologies and transparent attempts to insert themselves into my new reality. The day after the shower, my phone was ringing off the hook. Margaret was tearful. Jessica, darling, I feel terrible about that Mother's Day comment. I truly thought you were struggling. You just never showed anything. Why didn't you just show off a little? We're so proud of you now. You and Mark absolutely must come to Christmas. We can invite the Forbes reporter. I want to tell everyone about my millionaire daughter. I took the call while relaxing on a sun lounger on the terrace of my New Hamptons compound. Thank you for the apology, Mom, I said, my voice calm and distant. But I didn't show off because I didn't need your approval. Your pride now is just as conditional as your pity was before. And no, we won't be at your Christmas this year. Mark and I have decided to spend a quiet Christmas together, focusing on our growing family.
Besides, I'll be starting my maternity leave soon, a generous, fully paid one, as you know. Emma's attempts were even more manipulative. She called crying about how much she needed my advice on her husband's struggling portfolio, claiming she was so happy for me, but that she'd always felt so much pressure to be the perfect one. It's true, Emma, I said, cutting her off firmly. You did put a lot of pressure on yourself, and that's not my problem to fix. The only advice I have for you is this: stop defining your worth by your husband's income or your children's school tuition. I worked for my success in private. You flaunted a success that wasn't entirely yours. Now you have to live with the consequences of that public facing life. I am happy to close that chapter and move on. Margaret, my mother, rushed over. Margaret, my mother, rushed over, her face a mask of confusion.